Very good. Planning Commission for the City of Wilsonville, Wednesday, November 13, 2019 is now in order. Will our clerk please call the roll?
Chair Jerry Greenfield.
Here.
Eric Postma. Peter Hurley.
Here.
Ron Heberlein. Cameron Mesbah. Phyllis Millen. Here. Simon Springall.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our quorum is 4 members, and we have met the quorum. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This is a time when citizens have the opportunity to address the Planning Commission regarding any item that is not already scheduled for a formal public hearing tonight. There is no public hearing scheduled. However, if any member of the audience would like to speak about any work session item or any other matter of concern, please raise your hand so that we may hear from you now. I do not see any community members in the audience. So we'll move on to consideration of the minutes for Planning Commission October 9th, 2019. Are there any corrections or amendments to be made to the minutes? Hearing none, those minutes are approved as distributed. Our work session tonight on the I-5 bike ped bridge be introduced by our planning director, Ms. Betchel.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chair Greenfield, Commissioners. I am excited to introduce this topic this evening. This project has been long in the making. As you know, this project was identified in the Bike and Pedestrian Connectivity Plan a number of years ago. We have integrated it into the TSP, gone after grant money, and during the Town Center planning project, it became a framework project with a gateway plaza associated with it. Zach Weigel, Capital Projects Engineering Manager, is here this evening to walk through the work that is in front of us, the next phase of work on the I-5 Bike and Pedestrian Bridge that will occur over the next 1.5 to 2 years. While engineering will be in the lead on this as we're going through the design of that bridge, planning, you will notice, will also have a significant role in this project, in part because of the Town Center implementation, as well as the community engagement component. We want to make sure that there is some continuation, continuity with the activities that we conducted during the Town Center planning project, and then also in order to integrate this with the other implementation projects that we have coming from that Town Center plan. This is a critical project and will need the same caliber of effort from the Community Development Department. So with that, I will hand it over to Zach Weigel.
All right, thank you, Miranda. Thank you, Chair Greenfield and members of the Planning Commission. As Miranda said, my name is Zach Weigel. I'm Capital Projects Engineering Manager for the city. And we just recently selected the consultant team for this project, and we're in the middle of finalizing the scope of work and the fee for the project, and we wanted to get your input before we finalize the contract with them. So tonight, I just wanted to give you a brief project history. I know you're familiar with the Town Center plan work, but there's quite a bit of history about this project even before then. And then kind of get into the scope of the work and public engagement work that we have planned, and then have time for discussion and questions from Planning Commission. And I listed a few items for your consideration as you listen to this presentation. Some of the things we're looking for is what are the key stakeholders or organizations that you think we should be reaching out to? What do you think were the key elements from the Town Center project that we should carry forward in this project? And then how does Planning Commission want to be involved in this project? How do you want to lead? So project history, this idea of a I-5 bike and pedestrian bridge really started showing up with the 1973 Town Center Plan. You can see on this original map of there's that bike pedestrian bridge shown. Not really identified as a project yet, but kind of an idea of connecting the town center with the west side of Wilsonville. And then in 2006, it became a real project where it was identified as a need. And then in 2013, with the transportation system plan, it further became a project, a high priority project. And then, as you know, with the 2019 town center plan adoption, it became one of the key framework projects for implementing that plan. So the purpose of the project is really, there really isn't a safe crossing for bikes and pedestrians separated from vehicles over I-5. We have Beckman Road to the north. There's not bike lanes. There's kind of a shoulder on one side, no sidewalks. To the south, you have Wilsonville Road, which has really nice sidewalks and bike lanes, but pretty intimidating for the average cyclist or somebody walking. So navigating that interchange. So the bike ped bridge really provides that safe crossing. And then also it really directly connects the Villebois neighborhood, the West Transit and Smart Transit Center station to the town center via Barber Street. So making sure that the people who work and live in and near the town center have that direct access to transit. And then having a bike and pedestrian bridge really provides that, gives people travel options that's not dependent on the motor vehicle. So, and as I said, it's a priority project in a couple of these master plans. Also included with the town center update was this idea of a town center gateway, and included with this work, we'll be looking at designing the plaza with the bridge and linking that, the Emerald Chain Greenway. So recent work that we've completed on the project really started in November of 2013. We hired a consultant to start doing some conceptual design, laying out what the bridge, what could actually be built to connect town center with the west side of Wilsonville. And got some real cost estimating done with that. And that was really to prepare for some grant opportunities that were coming up. And we applied for a few grants after that and were not successful. But then in 2017, the city obtained a $1.55 million grant from Metro to do design on this project. And in 2018, we became concerned with some of the federal requirements that would come along with that money. And luckily, we had a federal project that was already under construction, Kinsman Road Extension, and we were able to exchange that money with that project. And that we were able to keep the grant funds, but remove all the federal requirements from this project. So it was really a win-win for the city on that. And then just in May this last year, the city acquired the property highlighted in yellow, as you see on the map, and that would serve as the East Bridge Landing and the Gateway Plaza. So the upcoming work we have planned really can be broken down into 5 kind of key phases, and starting off with reaffirming the vision and goals that will help guide the decision-making on this project. Really working off of the town center work that happened recently. So we expect that to happen here in January and really help guide the design of the project. And then we'll jump right into conceptual design. And there's 3 key decisions that need to occur under that phase of the work. And one of those is the West Bridge Landing. Where does that happen? How does it happen? One of the key issues with that is the Peyton Lane. It's right in the wrong spot for the bridge. So we need to look at, do we need a bridge over that road, or can we do some kind of circular, landing. So that'll be one of the key decisions on that. And then we get into bridge type, size, and location. Really, the size and location will be is already determined, or will be determined by ODOT requirements as we cross the interstate. But really getting feedback on the bridge type that is preferred for this bridge crossing. And then one of the last key decisions is the Gateway Plaza layout. We'll do some alternative options to look at for how does that plaza layout and how does it connect with the future Emerald Chain Greenway. And once those key decisions are made, we're looking in the springtime for that work to happen. We'll get right into the 30% design, and that's where we get into the fun stuff. Looking at the lighting, the retaining walls, what do they look like, landscaping, railings, really the aesthetics of how that plaza and bridge are going to look. And that's going to really culminate at the city picnic, where we're trying to get public feedback on that phase of the work. And included with that is a public art, looking at, there's a couple of ways to do public art on this project, and and getting feedback from the public on what that looks like will be key in that phase. You could have the landscape architect can come up with different options for public art, or you can do a whole process where you engage local artists to come up with art that could be incorporated into the project. So we really want the public process to drive that decision. That'll happen around that time. And then we'll get into, once we get that information, we'll start moving into 60% and then advancing design to 90%. And that will be kind of the stopping point for this work. So as each of those phases are occurring, we have specific public engagement that happens at each of those phases. And also happening throughout all of the work that's going on. We're coordinating with ODOT. There's above ground utilities on the west side of the project that will need to either get moved or placed underground. So we'll be coordinating with those utilities. There's a lot of environmental permitting that we'll need to do. And then because of the retaining walls and bridge structures, there's quite a bit of geotechnical analysis that'll happen. So a little bit more on public engagement. It really kicks off with here in the next couple of months with developing a public engagement plan that will really detail out, the type of involvement that we foresee for each of those phases of the work. And we're really excited to use Let's Talk Wilsonville on this project. In the past, we've had to use consultant web pages that are created or survey that are created by consultants, and now we'll be able to bring that all in-house and really make use of that forum on this project. And then we have a series of stakeholder meetings that are envisioned where we'll be meeting with key property owners and businesses and residents in the area. And then we'll do more of the traditional outreach with open houses and online surveys. And then, as I mentioned before, taking advantage of city events like the picnic in August. And then we'll have each one of those phases of the work will have key check-in points with Planning Commission and City Council to make sure the design team is on the right track with the project. So that's kind of what we have planned. I put up some questions that we'd like your feedback on, so I'm happy to answer your questions.
When you refer to the picnic, you're talking about the block party?
Yeah, yeah.
Is it going to be ready by then?
It is a lot of work. I meant to mention, when we did the grant transfer with Metro, we still had to meet the timeline that we had originally committed to with the grant funds. So the work needs to be completed by September 2021, the design work. So yeah, we are on a shortened time frame, but we're going to make it work.
What does 30, 60, 90% actually refer to? Percent of what?
So it's just the kind of the design, level of design. Those are kind of the key design periods of design where you check as a check.
Roughly, are we talking about the percentage of the time frame, the planning time frame?
No, it's more related to like the level of design work that you've done. So it's kind of like 30% is like a high level layout type of design. 60% is you're getting into more of the details, and 90% you're like almost ready to construct.
Right.
Yeah.
How is the Let's Talk Wilsonville site being used?
I can probably answer that a little bit better. I believe currently there are 5 projects up there that have content. That information has rotated. The projects that are up there have rotated since launch time. I think everything that's up there now is new. We had good survey responses on the equitable housing project. Planning, I know, we put up a fun one in October related to National Community Planning Month. And so we asked the community to just do a fun trivia quiz, which also helped. It really was rooted in trivia of Wilsonville, but it was rooted in planning projects. So it asked people fun questions about Villebois or about park design. And then when they got it at the end, after they answered everything, they got a response back to kind of tell them the correct answers. And it gave about a paragraph for 3 to 4 sentences about each of those projects so people could learn something about planning in Wilsonville. That was just a fun way for us to engage on Let's Talk Wilsonville. I believe the last time we checked, there was about 300 registrants, and we haven't really pushed it much since the block party. So there was an initial push at the block party to get people registered, and a Boones Ferry Messenger article. And then it has really only been pushed through the individual projects when we've put something out there. I know in the first day the solid waste survey was up, we got the most registrants in one day. I believe it's 68 or 70 in one day, something like that. Trash, it apparently gets a high response rate. So we are hoping, particularly with a lot of new projects that you'll see coming online, especially related to the town center, things like the I-5 bike pedestrian bridge, but also implementation around the streetscape design plan and the transportation system plan, that each time we have a new survey, you'll see new registrants to that website. So we're happy with where we're at currently. It's a process that we know is occurring kind of over the next couple of years.
Do we track return visits by registrants?
Yes, you can track that information.
And do we track clicks?
Yes, that is automatically tracked. So we also, one of the nice things about Let's Talk Wilsonville is it breaks down, if I can remember their categories, I think it's aware, informed, and engaged. So aware means somebody has visited the page. Informed means that they have, I believe, clicked on something. So they've clicked on a document or clicked on another project. And then engaged means they have actively engaged in one of the engagement tools. So they've taken a survey, they've answered a quick poll, or they've posted a story on one of the pages. I know that you all are very actively engaged in the Equitable Housing Strategic Plan, and I would recommend that you visit that page on Let's Talk Wilsonville. It's still up because there will be more engagement that is coming on that project. And we had a lot of residents actually fill out the story tool and tell stories about their experience with housing and housing affordability in the city of Wilsonville. So I encourage you to check those out as well. And I know Kim is in the process, if she hasn't already, of posting the results of that survey online.
Good. I'm trying to think. My visit to the website, my recollection or impression is that there's no direct link from the splash page to Let's Talk Wilsonville, is there?
So on every single page of the city of Wilsonville, if you look at the top right corner, there's a Facebook icon and I think 2 or 3 other icons. And one of the icons that's up there is the Let's Talk Wilsonville. If you also go to the menu, there's the Get Involved section, and under Get Involved, there's a direct link to Let's Talk Wilsonville as well. So there are multiple locations within the city website in order to get to Let's Talk Wilsonville.
So you have to be excuse me, you have to be somewhat knowledgeable to recognize that icon on the front page.
Right, but I know when we first launched it, it was also one of the things that was in the banner, thank you, where the images flash by and there's a direct link, and it's in the main menu. So even if you don't know the icon, if you go to the main menu where it says Get Involved, it's the first or second item, and it says Let's Talk Wilsonville.
You need to click on that, Let's Get Involved, to get to Let's
Correct.
Talk.
So, Chair,
Okay.
can I ask some questions about the bridge? So, would you go to slide 5, please, with the sketch of that one. So, I guess part of the upcoming work is to work out the actual alignment of the bridge. Is that correct? We don't really know the alignment.
It will be on that property and perpendicular to I-5.
Does it have to be perpendicular to I-5?
It doesn't have to be, but the more angled you make it, the higher the cost because the longer the span.
So, on the left-hand side there, would you identify Peyton Lane?
Yeah.
Please, just for the benefit of the commission, if we can. I think I know where it is.
Mouse work?
Does the mouse work?
The mouse is not working.
Okay, so it's the street on the left-hand side.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah, now.
There we go.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's this one right here.
Right, okay, so is that a public street?
That is a good question. I believe it's a private street.
I can tell you it's a private street.
Yeah.
I suspected it.
It's posted that way.
Yeah, I suspected it was private. I was just wondering if, would it be possible to route pedestrians and bicyclists through Peyton Lane rather than further up Boones Ferry and then along Barber towards the transit centre?
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, if we were to build a continuation of this trail from the town centre over the bridge,
Right.
it would seem to me to make it go along Peyton Lane rather than straight up to Barber and that way.
Yeah, that's something that we can look at as part of the project. I think what we had envisioned was kind of a multi-use trail up to Barber Street, but that's definitely something that we can look at.
Yeah, multi-use trail would be great. Barber Street isn't very wide at that section.
Yeah, once you get to Barber Street, it's pretty constrained. Yeah.
Can this be accomplished within the right-of-way, or do we need to acquire more property?
For along Boones Ferry,
Yes.
we're not sure. That's something that we'll have to look at. We're not exactly sure if it can fit within the existing right-of-way, so that'll be part of the design work.
So as part of the design work and the discussion of the West Landing, we're going to look at the connectivity, the bike ped, specifically connectivity to Wes. Is that what I understand?
No, well, it's not part of the scope of the work for the bridge. It's really about connecting to the existing infrastructure on Barber and Boones Ferry right now. There could be a future phase of looking at, how to better get to that destination.
It seems to me that's gap. I mean, a connectivity gap in the pedestrian bike ped sense, because those roads don't feel very safe to me.
Right.
Neither as a cyclist or a runner. Neither Boones Ferry or that section of Barber. I think Barber's okay because it has at least a sidewalk. But there is a sidewalk. I'm sorry, there is a sidewalk on that section of Boones Ferry, isn't there, on one side? So yeah, it's okay for pedestrians, but cyclists are a bit limited, I think. Okay. The other question I had was on the east side, on the town centre side, where there's a new building there, an opticians or something. Where can you identify where that is in relation to the pad that we own?
It's right on this triangular piece of property, sorry. Right
Okay,
here.
so the landing site will be to the south of that new building.
Yeah. So there's kind of a undeveloped piece of property to the south of that, kind of between the Fry's parking lot and that
Yeah.
building.
At one point, we were looking at that, what is that triangular area before it became claimed.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and it's certainly envisioned then that the, in the town centre plan, that the bridge would actually go over town centre loop.
Yes.
As well as the I-5 and Boones Ferry Road,
That's correct.
all three streets.
Yep.
Okay. How far is that? The distance-wise, those?
I'm not sure. It's a long ways. One of the key conversations we'll need to have with ODOT is whether we can put a pier in the
yeah.
the median of I-5.
That was what
we will be pushing hard for that.
Right. Otherwise, it's another suspension bridge.
Right. It's a very long span otherwise. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
So it seems to me that a major design problem is going to be how to make a long ramp possible for bicycles. Well, bicycles and ADA accessibility. In this case, if it went parallel with Boones Ferry, it could be quite long.
That's
It'll
correct.
need to be.
Yeah.
If it involves any kind of a landing and a switchback, it would require some real estate acquisition, I should think.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we'll need to look at is, it would be if we did it switchback type, it would be more probably circular so that bikes will be able to make that curve up to the elevation they need to get across the bridge. So switchbacks are just too difficult if you're on a bike.
Mm-hmm. Read dangerous.
But yeah, to meet ADA, the slope needs to be less than 5%. So it's quite a distance to get up to that elevation.
What's the height requirement for a bridge over I-5?
So that's something that we'll have to work with ODOT on. I believe right now what they're telling us is 18 feet clearance.
18.
18.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's high.
Have you given some thought to, or maybe that's part of what this conversation is about? We've got the landing here, and that will be obviously taken up by all the circular bridge that's coming down there. But then creating the we were talking about the Emerald Chain, but we've got quite a bit of distance in here between that and then our first real park. And have you given some thought as to creating that safe transition between those two locations?
So in the interim, there'll have to be some connection back to Town Center Loop because those are private properties between the property that we own where the plaza will be and Town Center Park. There'll be some interim condition where bikes and pedestrians are directed back to Town Center Loop West is what we would envision.
Okay, because there's no way really to transit,
Right.
you'd be trespassing across private land. Right. But again, that's possibly as we move into this town center remodel thing, there might be opportunities for some negotiations there to.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
And, that's some of the things that we'll find out during the stakeholder interviews and start having those conversations with those property owners.
Right, so that would obviously be one of the conversations that needs to occur. Is there a way to access some of that land, which, you know, a lot of that's parking lot right now, so is there a way to make it something other than a parking lot? Okay.
I'm interested in the visualization on page 3 of, with all these future buildings.
From the town center plan, isn't it?
In the town center plan. I do think that it's really a smart thing to do with this bridge early as an incentive for that development over there. Right now, the bridge will be pretty standalone, without much on the east side of it to attract use. But as it's developed in the plan on page 3, that's very interesting. Even more interesting is the more visionary visualization on page, we're 2 after that, the upcoming work page.
Yeah, that's also from the town center plan.
Which doesn't actually show that landing, so.
You can kind of see
In the back.
visualization of the bridge in the background there. So that's kind of on the back side of the theater looking
It's
west.
red and white, way in the back there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm finding it on here.
So the properties on the town center side of the bridge are Fry's to the south and the movie theater to the east. Is that correct?
Yeah.
There's nothing in between Fry's and the movie theater?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, the kind of on, they're the loading areas, I would say, for each of those
Right.
businesses, yeah.
And right now, there's almost no way to get from Fry's parking lot into the movie parking
It's
lot.
not, no, they're not connected.
Does this property abut that long driveway that goes into the theater area?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Let's see.
Yeah, okay, so it does, because there's a,
Yeah, there's a black line over the top of it, but yeah.
okay. So, in a way, if there was a way to, since that's abutting that, if you connected that and then over behind the theater, there's, you're almost to the park there. So there seems to me there might be some way to make a little better connection there that was a safe connection to, at least to the park. I'm kind of envisioning going around the back of the theater there that you're right across the street from the park then.
Needs to be safe and inviting.
Yeah.
Well, that's true. Okay, behind a building doesn't sound inviting, does it?
Yeah,
But I just think there might be a way to look at it. And if people can kind of see that as a possibility, then it makes this whole concept a little more real, rather than just, somewhere down the line, we'll have this wonderful connection. But if,
Right.
even somehow it wasn't perfect, but it was,
Yeah, it would need some look at, because that is kind of the loading area, for Fry's, and making sure it is safe
Yeah.
to have that activity back there, yeah.
well, and that's kind of what's wrong with the other side too, because that private lane is, the reason they have it private is because of all the trucks. And that's what they tell you if perchance you are caught on that, on that private lane, they inform you that it is a safety issue and you can't be walking here. So, I've heard that. So anyway, and that does present a little bit of a problem over there, because there isn't, as everyone's mentioned, there's not a lot of room for bikes. I mean, walking on the sidewalk is fine, but for bicycles, it's kind of narrow there. And People do tend to drive a little fast through that, that area amazingly, and even though they're only going down to the intersection, but they're kind of speeding up through there, so.
Yeah, I mean, I can envision that on the west side, there would be some intersection modifications at Barber Street to make sure that bikes and pedestrians are able to, you know, better access the multi-use trail that would go along with this project, so. We did just recently repave that section of Boones Ferry Road, and we were able to add a bike lane on the west side, or the southbound side of the street.
Oh, I didn't know that.
We were not able to fit it on the northbound side, of the street, though. So it's still just a shoulder on there, on that side.
What inputs have we gotten from the property owners on both sides?
So we've had a few discussions with the theater, you know, they just want to make sure that, you know, that it's going to be clear where pedestrians and bicycles are going in the interim until that connection can be made. And then the west side, we really need to do this alternatives analysis before we start talking to the property owners, because we really don't have an inkling of what the impacts will be to those properties yet. So that will be part of the public outreach.
Are the town center owners enthusiastic about the prospect?
I think some are. I mean, some of the, I mean, there was a lot of outreach conducted through the town center project, and this was a very popular project. I don't know if you want to add anything, Miranda, but.
I would just note that during acquisition, we had to do some outreach, or we did conduct some outreach to the property owners related to the CC&Rs that are in place in a portion of town center. So that did include some outreach to different property owners, making them aware of the acquisition and the future plans from the city. And we did receive support. No objections that I'm aware of came through during that process. I thought that it was resolved. Oh.
So it was not unanimous.
All but one. And the one was Regal, but it was mainly, they had to classify it as an objection because of the process that's outlined in the CC&Rs that govern the area. But mainly it was, they had questions and concerns about the access point, and also the requirements as part of their conditions of approval for parking. And so we were able to let them know the access point wouldn't be closed, and also that they would still be meeting the parking requirements for their parking lot. So the only outstanding issue was there's some, I believe there's some irrigation lines and some lighting that they just want to make sure that we would, if we cut them, if we have separate systems, which is what we would do, that we would reconnect their system. So it's just circling back with them at this point and getting their approval, but they didn't have an outright objection. They didn't object
to the bridge per se. It was more about the fact that you can see from this aerial view that a portion of the site that we acquired is already striped and is a part of a parking lot, and that's essentially spillover parking for Regal when that was constructed. And so it really was just about if that portion of the parking is impacted in any way, that we would work with them to correct any of those impacts.
I would think, or at least hope, that they would recognize customer access advantage. That would be something to benefit them. Anything else here?
Did any of you have any specific input on the engagement in terms of specific stakeholder groups or organizations that we haven't already talked about, or anything that we did in town center that you'd like to see carried forward, or how the commission you would like to be involved? outside of work sessions in terms of like the public engagement component.
Well, I know in the town center, we made an effort to get, I know there were some high school students who came to some of the events and things, but I'm almost thinking even if we could reach down the next level down, that middle school level, because it seems to me they're somebody who would really benefit by a safe crossing across there. You know, I think of traveling from the west side over to the movie theater, let's just say, or to Bullwinkle's or anything, or the bowling alley or anything else. It's a difficult process and I think some people don't let their kids do it, the middle school age kid do it, because you are traversing that intersection it's quite scary, quite frankly, to navigate a bike through. So I'm thinking that middle schoolers might be really interested in a safe way to cross there. And we've got all of Villebois, we've got the other developments, and I think that would be a good group that could get really excited and maybe be a real, maybe even involving in the art design piece of it too. So it's just because that's one of the things I keep thinking about is getting from that side to this side is dangerous.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think in concept, we need to look at connectivity, the complete connectivity east-west, especially from the residential area of Villebois to town centre, and how that would be done by a pedestrian, by a young kid on a bike safely, how you can imagine that. And I remember Councillor Lehan at some part in the past talking about her vision of, you know, safe connectivity in the city, that if you imagine a 10-year-old kid on a little BMX bike, how is he going to, or she, going to get around safely within you know, the city when we have all these major roads intersecting? And you know, this is, I think, has got to be a key part of implementing that sort of vision to provide at least, you know, safe access for our younger community.
Well, I'd love to see the young people's art encouraged in this development, like the Beauty and the Bridge. Seems to me that would also increase not only the public awareness of the bridge, but the investment of those young people in using it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking that too when I said you know, not the design so much, but in the art piece of it, because the Beauty and the Bridge project's been such a success. I mean, literally, you know, we don't have a real problem with it being defaced because
it's so beautiful. Yeah. We can be.
It was done by the kids, so.
Yeah. It's something that is kind of has become a source of pride in the city. I think the Beauty and the Beast, and
I think this is another real opportunity
Beauty and
for
the Beast,
that.
Beauty and the Bridge. Excuse me.
Yeah.
The stakeholders, I assume we're going to involve the business owners from the east side of the bridge. I think maybe that office is closed right now, the call center. Is that vacant right now?
Correct.
So, well, at least the landowner you would involve, and but the business that has lots of trucks, what's that? Phyllis.
Right Aid.
Rite Aid.
Oh, yeah.
Distribution center.
Yeah. And if we are going to think about widening Barber Street eventually, perhaps not as part of this project, but in the future, then we probably should talk to those businesses along that section of the street and get their, you know, perspective on a potential future cycle track and stuff like that.
Right, yeah.
You mentioned that, I understand you did a swap with some of the grant funding on this, but you're still looking at to utilize all the money by September of 2021?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've got a little more than a year here that, for the design, but it needs to be at that 90% level then, at that point in time? Okay.
relatively fast tracking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was just thinking that's a lot of work that needs to get done in the next, year and a half. So.
Yeah.
When do you think the public engagement on Let's Talk Wilsonville will be live for this project?
Probably in January is when we'll start the kickoff for that.
Okay.
We're planning a kickoff event, high visibility kickoff event.
Well, it's currently in the scope. So we just understand it. The end of the year is sneaking up on us. So I think the hope is to do some type of kickoff both on Let's Talk Wilsonville as well as an in-person event in the January, February timeframe.
Yeah.
Wonderful weather for it.
Should we have
It
an
might
outdoor-
get a lot of people inside. That worked with Town Center. When the weather was great, they didn't show up.
But it won't be an
Unless it
outdoor
was at the block
meeting.
party.
It won't be an outdoor meeting then, I guess.
No.
On site.
Not until August.
Okay.
And this is a little stretching this whole concept, but since we're also looking at the bike head bridge across the river, I mean, if you think about it, if you were a bicyclist and you wanted to come all the way around, now where you're ending up on Boone's Ferry Road and then maybe making your way to this bridge across. But, in the future, maybe there might be a way to think about that bridge landing and then coming out more around where the Tonkin Trail comes around.
Kinsman,
and
right?
connecting those two. I mean, really, if we're talking about connectivity and being able to bike the whole thing, I mean, it's just another thought to, I mean, I realize it's kind of a complication, but it's just, if we're looking for the future and making it perfect or the way we would like it to be, then that needs to be considered in there too, so.
Yeah, as Commissioner Springall had mentioned, that Barber is really the key to connecting all that
Yeah.
together. So, future analysis of that street would be really key to connecting all those together.
All the
Yeah.
way across, yeah.
I think that's an interesting observation because the Tonkin Trail kind of routes to the west side through Graham Oaks, and that's a long way from town center. But you may want to have some connectivity back towards the town center more directly from the south side of Boone's Ferry Road or from the new 5th Street extension and that area. Mm-hmm. How would cyclists access that area, say from that part of town, Old Town area?
Right.
How would they safely access to the town centre? Would it be over this new bridge, or would it be over the complicated I-5 underpass?
Right.
Which is, as you say, it's actually pretty hazardous because not because the sidewalks are narrow, because they're not. They're great, but there's so many interchanges with fast-moving vehicles going on and off the I-5 ramps.
Yeah, I think if we're trying to design for all ages and abilities, that interchange is, like I said, is pretty intimidating.
Yes.
So it's good to have alternatives.
So is the plan to, as you go through these different phasing things here, 30%, 60%, are you bringing that back to the Planning Commission then?
Yeah, that would be the idea, is to have those check-ins to make sure we're on the right track. Yeah, meeting those vision and goals that we set at the beginning.
Okay.
So at some point, will there be an RFP for artist proposals?
So, it's funny, we had this very detailed scope for artist engagement, and it really felt like we were forcing kind of a process. And I think we really pulled that back and kind of want to have it happen naturally. So what we have envisioned right now is to kind of get feedback from the public on what are the art opportunities, what do people want to see, and then really tailor the, how the art, if artists are engaged, is it more of a landscape architecture type, is it lighting or stormwater features, or is it really engaging artists? So that kind of happens around the 30% design phase of defining that art process in more detail.
About what time period would that be?
That'd be in the August timeframe.
So if you were looking at utilizing students in this, then that's where that kind of concept could get discussed and fleshed out a little bit.
Right.
Anything else?
So I guess that leads that last comment. Sorry, one more thought from Commissioner Milan there. If we were to engage at the middle school level, we could suggest that they might be interested in contributing to the art.
Yeah.
Is that's where you're leading, right?
That's what I'm thinking, yes.
Yeah, that's a possibility. I don't know if we're ever going to repeat what happened with the I-5 underpass, but that was altogether a high visibility, big deal across many schools. It's not something you can
just make happen. Yeah.
But this may be, I mean, it's certainly worth feeling the interest for that sort of thing, right?
On the other hand, that was a good rehearsal.
Okay, I
like that attitude.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. When will we be seeing you next?
So we'll be starting the vision and goals process here in January. So I would say in that January, February timeframe, we'll be checking in on making sure we got those right.
Great. Thank you. Then that brings us to a number of informational items. Again, I'll call on Ms. Bajel.
So Zach Weigel, Capital Engineering Projects Engineering Manager, is here tonight to also provide you with an update on the French Prairie Bridge project. As you know, we've been working on this for the last several years, looking at the alignment and bridge type. There's been a task force and advisory committee. So he's going to provide an update as well as next steps on the progress of that project.
Yeah, thanks again, Zach Weigel, Capital Projects Engineering Manager. And so, I was looking back through the records on this project, and we haven't provided an update in over a year and a half, so I apologize for that. I think last time I was before you, we were just determining what the evaluation criteria would be. So we're coming towards the end of this project, and because it's been so long, I thought I would just give a brief overview of the project and then talk about kind of where we've gone with this project. So just in review, we're talking about the bike and pedestrian bridge over the Willamette River, connecting the Ice Age Tonkin Trail down to across Butteville Road and eventually to the Willamette Valley Scenic Bikeway along Butteville Road. Some of the key project benefits for this is really establishing, Wilsonville as a healthy community, Wilsonville as a HEAL community, and connecting those trails together really provide that recreation and activity that is one of the goals of the city. And then also the bridge would serve as a emergency response, redundant emergency response to the I-5 Boone Bridge. It'd be seismically designed to withstand a Cascadia subduction zone earthquake. So it would be available during a major emergency when the Boone Bridge does not meet that standard currently. It also could serve for secondary response to accidents on I-5, so getting tow trucks and being able to clean up accidents quicker. And then, economy, for tourism, there was a study done in 2014 about the Willamette Valley Scenic Bikeway, and it generated $3 million in bike tourism in just 1 year. So you can imagine, connecting these major trail systems together, the effect that would have on the local economy would be a benefit. And then part of the Wilsonville tourism strategy identified this project as one of the top priorities. So I included this map just to show that there's really not a good way, if you're on a bike or a pedestrian, to get across Wilson or the Willamette River. Between Newburgh and Oregon City, there's only the I-5 Boone Bridge, which I would argue is not the safest choice for if you're on a bike. So I included this image just to show that there's a lot of these regional trail systems that all meet right at Boones Ferry Park, and then on the also on the south side of the river. So you have the Ice Age Tonkin Trail coming in on the west side, and then to the east side you have the Stafford Beckman Trail that eventually connects to that I-5 undercrossing trail. So two pretty large regional trails coming together in Boones Ferry Park. So it makes for a good connection across the river at this location. And as I mentioned earlier, you it's at Champoeg, the Willamette Valley Scenic Bikeway starts. So it's a short ride from this location to Champoeg along Butteville Road. So the current project work that we're about to complete is funded through a Metro grant that we obtained in 2009. It was for $1.25 million. The goals of the current project work that it was to determine what the preferred bridge location is, what the preferred bridge type is, and then once we have that information, we're able to generate a real cost estimate for a bridge that could actually be constructed at this location. So getting real good numbers for the first time. And that information is what we need to help decide whether to move forward with this project. So pretty robust public engagement on this project. We did 20 some project stakeholder interviews to kick the project off. We formed a technical advisory committee that was really we had Marion County, Clackamas County, ODOT, Metro, and then all of the regulatory agencies that help provide guidance on some of the decision making in this project. We also had a project task force that made recommendations to City Council on key decisions. And that task force had local representatives, had regional representatives. We tried to really include a lot of different entities on that. Like we had tourism representatives, active transportation representatives, business leaders, neighborhood representatives. So we really tried to get a really good group with a lot of different perspectives to help make decisions on this project. And then we had a number of open houses to get public input on a lot of the decisions. Because the bridge lands in the city on the north side and then in Clackamas County on the south side, we really have City Council and the Clackamas Board of County Commissioners agreeing with all of the recommendations that the task force is making. And then I listed a number of stakeholder briefings that we had during the project. So last time I presented before you, we had just determined what the evaluation criteria for the project would be, and I included this slide. And the technical advisory committee really helped identify kind of the key decision points or key information for how to determine where the bridge location should be. And then the task force kind of assigned weight, what's important of those considerations, what's the most important, what's less important, to help determine what the best location was. And so we came up with these 3 locations. That's the I-5 Boone Bridge on the right, and then on the left is the railroad bridge. And so 3 different bridge alignments in that location. And the project team started off with kind of doing an initial assessment of those 3 bridge locations based on those evaluation criteria. The technical advisory committee weighed in kind of on the technical aspects and the permitting requirements that would be needed for the bridge. And then the task force kind of made the ultimate scoring decisions and recommended the alignment W1, which is the one next to the railroad bridge, the furthest west bridge location. So here's kind of a close-in view of that bridge alignment. Kind of starts right at the end of Boone's Ferry Road, crosses over Butteville Road, and then has to come back around to connect to the road. Once the alignment was selected, the project team came up with these 5 different bridge types to assess. And we really started with kind of the lower cost alternative, which is the steel girder bridge there in the middle, and then all the way up to different bridge styles, up to the tied arch which would be the most expensive. And the project team, using the evaluation criteria that was determined before, kind of did a qualitative analysis of each of those different bridge types and kind of assigned a low, medium, or high to each of those criteria. And the technical advisory committee weighed in on that, really on the environmental aspects of that work. And then that information was provided to the task force. And we also did some public outreach, and it was pretty clear from the public outreach that the cable stay and the suspension were the preferred bridge types. I included this survey question. It really shows, the question was, do the benefits of the bridge outweigh the costs or negative impacts? And you can see that the cable stay and the suspension were the only 2 where it was over 50% strongly or somewhat agreed with that statement. So that really kind of sums up the public input that we received on those 5 bridge types. So the task force recommended to advance the suspension and cable stay bridges, kind of the medium cost bridge types. And the main reasons were because those 2 bridges span the river. There's no need to install piers within the water. And being in front of the marina, that was a key consideration. We don't want to affect access to the marina. And then it also had the least impacts to the marina parking lot. And there was really a emphasis on making sure that this bridge was a signature type bridge, and wanting, with that tourism component, making sure that met that requirement. So we did another public survey. We did a bunch more design work, kind of refined the information on those 2 bridge types, went out with another survey to the public, and the feedback we received was a slight preference to the suspension bridge. They were both well received. People liked both designs, but there was a slight preference to the suspension bridge. And we brought that information back to the task force, and they was a unanimous decision to to recommend the suspension bridge as the preferred bridge option. And I included this. It's a photorealistic image of what the bridge would look like at that location. This is a view from the I-5 Boone Bridge deck.
I note that the Mid-River Pier that shows in the picture there actually, Commissioner Springhall has pointed out that that is so close to the railroad bridge. It's actually the railroad bridge's pier that shows there.
That's correct. The design team made sure that the bridge was located far enough away from the railroad bridge that if, for some reason, like during an earthquake, if that bridge were to collapse or slide off the foundations, that it would be far enough away.
But in this view, those piers appear to be under the bike bridge.
It's funny. It does. The bridge does kind of blend in to the background. Yeah. So the current project work summary, we're coming towards the end of the project work that we had with this grant money. So the project goals that I listed at the beginning, the preferred bridge location was at west alignment, preferred bridge type is the suspension, and then the cost estimate that we developed off of that is $37 to $49 million. So kind of the next steps is we still need to get confirmation from Clackamas Board of County Commissioners on the task force recommendation of the suspension bridge. We're working with the Clackamas County staff to get on their agenda in the next couple months. And once we have that, we'll have a public hearing with the Wilsonville City Council. The project team is working with Federal Highway right now to see if we can do some more environmental field work to kind of, that cost range is it's a pretty big range, and kind of confirming some of the conditions in the field will help narrow that cost range down. So there's a certain amount of work that you can do with federal funds before you start getting into the design and then having to build the bridge within a certain amount of years. And we're trying to push that to as far as we can and extend the amount of work that we can do with those grant funds. So we're working with them on that.
Does that cost range take account of the time, the cost change, increasing cost over time?
No, that is in current dollars. So the big question in that cost range is whether the geotechnical conditions, is there liquefiable soils, and that has a $10 million range if they are there or if they're not. So that's one of the things that we're working on, trying to extend the work that we have with the grant funds.
But obviously the time factor is important. Are there any projections about that?
So one of the things that we're going to start this spring is a goal from the City Council is to do a funding strategy report and look at the different ways that the bridge design and construction could be funded. So that'll help inform that time frame. Right now, it's just a guess. That's a summary of the project.
This was a long time ago, but there were some considerations about some archaeological sites or something, and maybe we are so past that, but that was one of the things that was still in my mind a long time ago that came up.
Yeah, that's one of the field work items that we're still working on, trying to get approval to continue. It's kind of hard to explain, but you can only do so much work when you're under a federal process without getting into what they would consider not planning but design. So we're trying to push the boundaries of that.
I know that the Grand Ronde tribes are involved in this. Have they given any kind of formal approval?
It's more of a consultation with the Grand Ronde tribes. It's not really, a yay or a nay, but yeah, we've been consulting with them throughout the project.
Can you remind me where the majority of the funding is to come from?
The funding for
what's our intent for coming up with our at least 43 or 49 million?
So that's the study that we're going to do coming up this spring on what are the opportunities to pay for the design and construction of the bridge. Right now, there's not funding identified past this current work that we're doing.
So I remember when this project started, and it originally started as an emergency bridge, and then it turned into a bridge that was for peds and bikes. It didn't start out as a ped and bike bridge. It started out as an emergency bridge. And so now we've got a subduction zone seismically done bridge that would outlast the Boone Bridge, but is geared toward a specific recreational community of maybe $3 million impact a year. I've said before at this dais that we should be looking at something that supports a bigger economy. We know that there's no other crossing on the Willamette River between Oregon City and Newburgh. And 49 million on average is going to turn into 70 million because of cost overruns. I would say before we go any further down this rabbit hole of a bike bridge for $3 million of recreation, we should involve possibly Eco Northwest to see what money we're throwing away toward one single recreational activity and its possible 3-4 month cycle that would be the Oregon bicycling tourism cycle out of a 12-month cycle versus a bridge that can actually move people that are part of the economy here, take some of that strain off of the Boone Bridge. Nobody's looking at alternate bridges, and I've said before, take this bridge and maybe move it, outside of the city of Wilsonville, but take this planning piece that's already started and put it into a bridge that can alleviate the traffic. I have not met one person over the last 5 years that has heard about this bridge that is interested in it as a bike bridge. Every single person that I've ever talked to is furious about it being a bike bridge when we've got the congestion problems that we have. So as probably my final salvo on this commission in regards to this, I would really urge the Planning Commission as we go forward to look at, where's the bang for our buck? I just did, quick scratching here of that 49 million usually on a capital improvement, you're going to have somewhere around a 40% cost overrun. Okay, so let's just call it 70 million. What are we getting for 70 million? Again, we don't know where that money's coming from, but even if the Fed said we'll pay 100% of it, what's it doing for the rest of the economy? I mean, if you want to drive people more insane than they are sitting in the Boone Bridge congestion, have them look over at a $70 million bridge that's used 3 months out of the year by tourist cyclists. You're not gonna have a lot of happy people. So just an editorial comment on what we've been looking at for about 10 years. And to remember that this did not start as a bike bridge. It started out as an emergency vehicle access bridge to get to Charbonneau and into Wilsonville, because otherwise TVFNR doesn't have access to Charbonneau. And they got to rely on Canby.
So I was a member of this task force. I think the project was run very well. there was a lot of discussion on many aspects of where the siting and the design of this bridge. It was very, very thorough. One of the things you talked about, Zach, was the reasons why we ended up targeting the cable stayed and the suspension bridge, and I think a lot of that was to minimize impacts, but not only impacts to the marina, but impacts to the river and the banks of the river as well, right? Because there's a side effect of putting any pier in the river that causes the level to rise, and we didn't have to do grading on. I think on the steel truss and steel girder and the tide arch all had to do grading on the banks because of impacts, and that itself. So there was kind of a knock-on impact. The other thing that that came out pretty clearly it came out in the final discussion was there was a lot of idea about what could be a iconic was the word, an iconic view of Wilsonville for the tourism industry and to bring economy into Wilsonville. I don't think that if we're going to put a dollar figure on it, I think we're looking at something much higher than $3 million. But I'm not an economist, so let me just say that this is also like the I-5 bridge that we were talking about. This is also a fundamental piece of providing connectivity for our community members and access to the retail shops and to the other facilities that are numerous in the north side of the river that are few and far between on the south side of the river in the Charbonneau district. I'm very pleased to see, we didn't talk about it in the presentation, but I was very pleased to see a trail alignment somewhere. Where did I see that?
On the south side of the river?
Yeah, on the south side of the river, a proposed trail alignment. So that would be an important piece, whether or not it's not covered by this current work that you're doing, or is it?
It's not. I mean, you have to cut the work off somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that would be the future phase, looking at connecting Charbonneau to this area.
Yeah, and I think that's another essential piece of this project that we need to think about. Is we want to continue to allow the community. We want to see Wilsonville as a single city, not Wilsonville plus Charbonneau. We need to support that community south of the river and physically connect it to the rest of the city. And they don't. The I-5, forcing them to drive on the freeway does not, to me, make a physical connection that all community members can use. So that piece of the bridge is essential, I think. Yes, it's a tourism draw, and I think it's potentially huge, but I can't put a dollar figure on it. And the emergency bridge element is also very valuable, but I think the value there comes from the second level services like tow trucks and stuff like that, rather than pure emergency services. I think that the Aurora Fire Service, for example, has we've got some agreement so that they will serve the Charbonneau community when necessary, and that we don't necessarily have to rely on DVF&R south of the river. But again, you'd have to talk to other people about that. On river crossings. No, well, okay, so on river crossings, I believe the Board of County Commissioners looked at consideration of a future bridge at the Canby Ferry site. I think they did a bunch of investigation into what would happen there and whatever went forward with that project may or may not be going forward, but they've certainly, the Board of County Commissioners has certainly been looking at additional river crossings, and this is clearly not something that the City of Wilsonville is not within our jurisdiction. But it's obviously well known that there is a traffic issue at the I-5. I don't think that expanding this bridge or changing its function is going to be constructive. Of course, we're also aware in the Planning Commission about the I-5 facility plan that does in fact solve this this traffic issue and flow issue on the I-5.
If not solves, mitigates.
It certainly will mitigate it, yeah. So I think I think this is a huge benefit to the city, to the community, to the business community, to the residents, and if people are concerned that we're not doing enough about traffic, then the work that we have been doing to mitigate this traffic is not being publicized or understood by those community members.
Other comments? What would you like from us?
This was just informational.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Next item.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chair Greenfield. It is my pleasure to introduce Kerry Rappold, our Natural Resources Manager. He is preparing to undertake the city's first urban forest management plan. This relates to the planning work that we do, both in long-range planning as well as in our development review and the requirements that we have for that. And so as Kerry finalizes a request for proposals for technical assistance on preparing one of these plans, he wanted to brief this group and get your input on the proposed scope. So with that, Kerry, take it away.
All right, thanks, Miranda. Well, good to see you tonight, Chair and members of the Commission. It's been quite some time since I've come to the Planning Commission, so it's great to come and present a couple items tonight. So as Miranda mentioned, that I'm very early in the process of looking at what this plan is going to be scoped out to do. As far as the schedule and how the public engagement will take place. But I wanted to just give you a very brief overview because I'll be coming back at, points along the way, specifically probably looking at once we get that information finalized in terms of, what we put together with the consultant. I'd like to get your initial input on that. And then, we'll be definitely coming back as far as the draft plan, the final plan, and trying to get you engaged with some of the public outreach too. One thought is we could use, Arbor Day as an opportunity, maybe the initial opportunity to get it out to the public, maybe use some of our planting events. There might be some events in the parks that would work well in terms of doing this. So this is really just a very, upper level kind of overview of it at this point. So basically, what is an urban forest management plan? If you look at these plans, I gave you an example of one that I thought was really good for the city of Seattle. But basically, you're looking at a vision for the urban forest. You look at, where the forest is at today, and that you could look at that in many different ways, the species composition, the canopy cover, what problems you're dealing with in terms of the existing forest. And when I say the forest, it involves everything from street trees to trees in people's backyards, trees and forests within our parks, open spaces. So it's the collective forest, so to speak, in terms of what we see in our community. And so, first of all, it's important to establish a vision for where you are today and where you want to be in the future. And one of those items that you could look at is canopy coverage. I believe right now we're probably about a quarter of the community as far as our urban forest. Well, do we want to see maybe 30% or 35 or 40%? So, that's one possible goal that would be part of that vision. You definitely start with any inventories and assessments that are available. One that I'll mention later is the street tree inventory that I believe was presented to you at one point. So that is a great piece of information in terms of looking at what we have here in the community. Certainly, like any type of strategic plan, you're going to have goals and objectives and actions that will ultimately come out of it. So the plan really looks at things from a number of different levels in terms of the urban forest, but it's probably going to have a list of actions that might, move some other projects forward in the future, such as maybe we would make some changes to our code, our tree protection code. So we'll have those list of actions or recommendations ultimately. And then there will be an implementation plan associated with those actions and how do we, take those items forward into the future. And then certainly monitoring is a critical piece of it in terms of, are we achieving our objectives, the objectives or the actions that we've, stated. So we'll have to look at, these things over time, whether it's a period of 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever the time frame that we decide is most important. So just a little bit of background, you all are aware of this, but the city has a very proud history of how we've dealt with trees in the community and how we've looked at our urban forest. We've been a tree city now for 21 years. We're also, I think, one of 10 communities in the state that has received the Growth Award, and that really shows that we're taking innovative steps in terms of what we do with, tree protection and preserving the urban forest that we have. We also have the Heritage Tree Program. There's currently 9 trees that are designated as part of that. They're throughout the community. They include these various species. One of the trees is the RV Short fir tree that's, right next to Park at Merrifield. So these trees have some, connection to our history, to our culture in terms of the community. And then, there's all this work that we've done with Friends of Trees. I've been involved with them over the last 17 years where we've done a lot of plantings within our parks. Simon is a volunteer with Friends of Trees, so I always appreciate his family's involvement with the group. And then just within the last year, we've actually decided to work with their Neighborhood Trees program. And so that's our street tree replacement program that Public Works is in charge of. And so I think they're looking at adding about 100 trees over the first year to a neighborhood in the community where there's a deficiency in terms of street trees. Certainly there's a lot to be proud of in this community in terms of what you see as far as trees. You think about the walnut trees over Memorial or Marassi Plaza. The cable trees, you probably are aware that we just had a recent ceremony for that in terms of acknowledging those in terms of their history. And then trees that are associated with just, these various historical structures and places in the community like the Toshman House. Trees, also provide access to, or there's pathways and things that provide access within our parks to our urban forest, places where people can, recreate and enjoy, maybe enjoy a little bit of shade on a hot summer day. Certainly they have a tremendous benefit to wildlife, whether they're birds like herons or woodpeckers, but mammals and all sorts of species depend on the trees that we have in our community. And there's just this aesthetic aspect to trees that everybody certainly enjoys and welcomes, with the various seasons. And then just, when you look at Wilsonville, like I said, it's about 25% forest cover. It's a pretty verdant and green community in many ways. So it's nice to think about where we're at, but also where can we go in the future. Some of the resources that we can rely on in terms of putting this plan together, we do have a very good code in regards to how we go about protecting and, looking at tree removal and what are the mitigation requirements for that. We actively engage, all the time with development sites in terms of that process. The planning division is really responsible for that in terms of tree removal. As I alluded to, there was the first street tree inventory that was done over about a year period. It concluded in April of 2018. Over 24,000 trees were inventoried as part of that. And the inventory included everything from the edge of curb 20 feet over. So it did take in some areas that were actually forested areas that, they accounted for trees that, had naturally grown there. I think there were a total of 274 species that they had identified as part of that plan. Maples make up the largest percentage, is about 30%, and 88%, I believe, of those trees were rated as healthy. So overall, we have a pretty healthy, street tree community in terms of what's in our urban forest. What comes out of that is the street tree replacement program. As I mentioned, we're now going to work with, the Neighborhood Trees program with Friends of Trees and try to increase, the street tree population in certain neighborhoods. We had a lot of work that was done with our SROZ, which I'm going to give the next presentation about, but we looked at these riparian areas as part of that, so we do have inventory information related to that. We've had a lot of arborist reports prepared over the years. Some of that information could be useful in terms of putting this plan together. And then certainly our park master plans, there's a lot of great work that was done with those to look at those forested areas within the parks. So what I want to just finish up with tonight here is really an initial opportunity for you to provide some input as far as what you might think is most important as we go forward with this plan and as we look at, what ultimately might be some of the important issues. Some of the things I just wanted to point out to you is we want to emphasize two areas within the community as focus areas in the plan. One being Charbonneau, and that'll probably be mostly focused on the French Prairie Road area, because there's been a number of issues over the years in terms of some of the trees that are there and some of the problems that have, public or private property owners have dealt with, as well as our Public Works Department. And then as the discussion tonight about Town Center, we feel Town Center is a very important area to kind of focus in on too. Sort of a catalyst too for maybe some of the change or the future growth within Town Center, but how do those trees play a really important role in terms of, their place within Town Center. Community engagement and stewardship are going to be really important aspects of this plan because it's going to deal with both public and private properties. And we want to make sure that people are, not only interested in the plan, but also willing to be those stewards of our urban forest also. As I said, canopy cover and goals related to that, whether it's the percentage of canopy or the species composition, we want to take a close look at that probably in regards to the plan. Ultimately, some maybe specific things related to tree preservation and maintenance. Certainly as the climate, has gone about some changes over the last, decades or more, there's issues that arise in terms of pests and other things that we may not have dealt with 10 or 20 years ago. And then we might want to look at some specifics related to climate adaptation in terms of species that we select. The species that we have today may not be the most appropriate species 5 or 10 years or 20 years from now. And then is there anything that we want to, look at in terms of our existing code requirements, things that might be best to change or take a second look at. So I just wanted to give you this opportunity here to, if you have any initial thoughts, certainly you don't have to share anything tonight. I'll be coming back to you, with a future meeting, but I'd be, welcome any input that you have.
A couple of things. I really appreciated the inventory that was done. Is that being continuously updated? Do you know what, like when permits are granted and would change when they're not good?
Yeah, the way that it was done, it was put into our asset management system, Cartograph. And so I'm not exactly sure how that works in regards to when, say, planning, approves a tree removal, if it involves a street tree. Do you know, Dan, specifically how they had thought about that process?
I thought about it. It doesn't work perfectly. It hasn't really found a way to make sure that communication, it doesn't necessarily get updated, but obviously if the tree's gone, it's gone when they go out there. But it's technology-wise and just communication and workflow-wise, we haven't identified a good way to do that.
I know that at OSU they have, they have a lot of programs going, but they have some very interesting studies being done on the benefits of tree canopies in an urban environment, and the not just the aesthetic effects, but the actual physiological effects on it. So I think as you're doing this plan, I think it's important to highlight some of those because it can get dismissed that it's just pretty trees, but that's not the whole extent of it. And I know that in the Seattle plan, which is a really good plan, they do talk about it a little bit, but I just think you need to hit that one just a little bit harder because, for those who want some fact-based kinds of things, the facts are out there in terms of how it can positively impact human beings. So I think that's real critical in terms of what you're putting together. I personally think goals around canopy cover, but that's just my personal preference in terms of looking at maybe some goals that we set. And so that's something that I think is important. A question, do we have any streams in the urban area that have salmonoid? We do.
Yeah.
I mean, the Willamette, yeah, I understand, but some of our other creeks and...
Yeah, I worked with ODF&W back in '06. We had a fish survey completed, so it looked at distribution and abundance. And at that point, we had Chinook, coho, possibly steelhead. They might have been rainbow. It's hard to distinguish sometimes when they're younger.
Yeah, when they're young.
And then within Beckman Creek, we have cutthroat trout throughout the extent of it. There's a resident cutthroat trout population. And we also have lampreys within Beckman, and I can't recall if they found those over at Coffee Lake Creek. But so, in many ways, we have a fairly healthy fish population. We don't have any spawning areas, certainly, but they provide important refuges for, rearing and migration as those fish move up and down the Willamette River.
Are those fish protected by code?
They're not specifically protected in our code, but, many of these species are listed as endangered or threatened, so they'd be covered under, the Endangered Species Act.
No, go ahead.
So when we had the inventory brought to us, one of the kind of the most striking and disappointing things was seeing the damage of the street trees. Mm-hmm. And I grew up in a city where when you fly in, all you see are trees. And it's a city that's larger than Portland. Okay. One of the things that you have, first of all, is what I found for the 30 years that I live here that just doesn't make any sense is that we require street trees, but we put them in parking strips that are only 3 feet wide. And so then what happens? I mean, we just saw, from the inventory, photo after photo of water meters, sewer lines, and sidewalks all being damaged at, tens of thousands of dollars per property if it's, if it's a bad situation. Yet we continue to require street trees. And I'm not opposed to having, trees in the front of houses, but the fact that we require them in a situation where we don't allow the tree to grow healthfully. And I noticed not too long ago that over by the library, in front of the apartments are probably, 25 years old back in there, and a whole street worth of street trees that were, about this big around, all were cut down, and quite rightfully so, because the sidewalk, is doing this, and right. The street itself is heaving. I would very much prefer to see, so yes, we do have Frog Pond coming in, and we do already have the design there, and it was something I had previously brought up, that either we have much larger what we call parking strips for no good reason, but anyway, the grassy area that's between the curb and the sidewalk, or if we keep that the same, make it where the required street tree for development is actually in the front yard of the property. And I noticed that you said that when the survey was done, it was for 20 feet from the curb.
Right.
Well, that would cover a lot of private, non-required street trees, even though they're all private, but you get my point. Mm-hmm. It's just never made any sense to me why we require street trees and then put the trees in a situation where they're bound to fail in the end. The homeowner's gonna come along, it might be in 20 or 30 years, but they're gonna have it cut down simply because it's destroying, you know,
Yeah,
part
no,
of
I
the
think those
infrastructure.
are all really valid points. I mean, there are issues that we deal with all the time in terms of looking at street trees and, you know, the type of species that, you know, get specified and the locations and the conflicts. And I mean, we constantly work through these issues. So, you know, invariably it's kind of a balancing act between still having street trees and all they provide in terms of, you know, the aesthetics and the benefits that, you know, that Commissioner Milan mentioned, that, you know, certainly they help in terms of stormwater and, you know, and intercepting rain and you know, soil structure and all sorts of things that are important. So, you know, it's certainly going to be a part of what we look at in the plan. You know, there's a limit to the kind of detail that we can probably go into, but it's certainly an important issue. And, you know, I think there will be some, you know, some aspect of that in the plan, certainly.
I think it doesn't do us any good if we have a nice mature tree of 25 or 30 years old that itself is okay, right? And we cut it down so that we can put in a 2-inch sapling that's going to take another 30 years to do exactly the same thing.
Right.
It doesn't do us any good.
Yeah.
It doesn't get us to a better canopy. It doesn't get us to a better urban forest.
Yeah, and there's a lot that's happening in these narrow little landscape areas, especially where they're associated with streets. And, you know, we also have to accommodate stormwater facilities and, you know, and other things in those areas. So, yeah, no, it's a good point.
I just think from the code side, we should look at that and accommodate, think about what to do when somebody does need to cut one down. I mean, I don't see any, you know, replacement trees there. It's probably because without taking out the sidewalk and part of the roadway, would you be able to grind down the stump that's there, that's been left behind, to then even begin to put in a replacement one?
Right.
You know, and it's only another 4 feet before you have the front steps of the apartment or the condo.
I mean, there are some neighborhoods, I can't think of them specifically, Dan would be more familiar with this, but there are some neighborhoods where the street trees are, they're not in that landscape strip. They're actually on, you know.
In that front yard?
Yeah, the front yard area, so.
Yeah, and those have caused issues over the years too.
Yeah.
We have 2 in our yard.
Yeah.
Certainly, there were some opportunities to do it better over the last couple of decades. And I think we've learned a lot of lessons, I would say, particularly in the last number of years. We've been a lot more thoughtful and careful about how street trees are installed, so setting up for more success in the future.
So refresh my memory in regards to if somebody does need to, you know, they come for, so the sidewalk's heaving, you know, the street's buckling, the water meter's now, you know, 2 feet from where it was. So they come in to get a tree cutting permit, right?
Right.
Are we requiring them to replace that tree because it's a street tree?
No, not if there's obviously, like, there's neighborhoods that, I mean, it's insane. Literally, you have like a 2-foot spot where the water meter is with an oak planted. And that should have never happened, admittedly. And so when those situations where there's a utility conflict, either they move it elsewhere where there is space or they don't replant it. So the process is set up for that.
Okay, so we're not penalizing them for something that we required them to do 30 years ago.
Correct, yes. Our tree code in that regard actually gives I would say, the appropriate amount of flexibility to do the right thing now to correct situations where, you know, I think part of it in the 80s and 90s, we didn't have inspectors. And I mean, there's certainly, there's also neighborhoods where, you know, the street tree plan, if it was planted as it was on paper, it probably would be okay. But the landscapers just went out and put whatever looked nice to sell the houses. And we didn't have any inspectors that went out and looked. So, and we're dealing with that now.
And then there are HOAs.
Yes. And some HOAs have been active in really managing, doing essentially mini management plans to really help manage the change of these trees in their neighborhoods over time. Because trees are infrastructure that they do change over time, and they don't live forever. Sometimes they live for a very long time, but they don't live forever.
All right, thanks.
Is the, what does the code say now about the width of the planting strips in the neighborhood streets? Do we have a common code for what that should be, or does it vary
It's not
by?
3 feet. It's
No,
usually, I think the typical is 6 feet.
Yeah,
Yeah, probably.
Sometimes it's 8 feet. I mean, it varies whether or not you're putting stormwater in
Right.
it. And
so does the 3 feet come from much earlier revision of the code, of the street planning code?
I don't even think we have that many 3-foot ones in Wilsonville. Other jurisdictions tend to have
is probably.
4.5, but
Yeah.
yeah, other jurisdiction, you'll see like in Portland and stuff, you'll see that fairly often, but in some older neighborhoods. But generally, we don't have them that small. Probably 4.5 is the smallest you're going to see.
Especially going forward, I mean, it's not realistic to have like stormwater facilities,
Yeah.
you know, in that area unless they're, I mean, like for a swale, it actually has to be like 8 feet minimum, which we're not going to see too much of that. But, you know, planter boxes still typically, you know, 4 to 5 feet at least.
You mentioned, Commissioner Hurley, is there anything else? Okay, thanks. You mentioned climate adaptation. Is that, I noticed that there's quite a lot of cedars around town that seem to be suffering and turning brown and dying, and I've read that's due to much warmer climates in general. Are we kind of revising our tree code to account for, you know, some of these effects where trees that used to do really well in this area no longer do? Is that how, I mean, how can you provide that feedback and constant updating? That's the first thing. And the second thing is, you know, practically when there are trees that die because of whatever, you know, climate issues, then are we, how are we actively replanting or replacing those trees? Or is it just left to the homeowner to take care of that?
Well, yeah, I think, you know, certainly, you know, there's a number of trees that you can see in the community that have probably declined over the years because of changes taking place. But, you know, I think it'll be an important aspect of this plan that we'll look at, you know, potentially, you know, is there a preferred list, you know, possibly that could be one idea, or, you know, there are some communities that are working on, you know, revising their tree list to kind of accommodate, you know, species that, you know, are in a different ecoregion that might, you know, in 20 years be more of our ecoregion. And then I think it depends where the trees are. You know, if they're in a natural area, we'll probably just let them die and, you know, keep them from being hazard trees. But if it's on somebody's property, I think it depends on what they want to do with it. If it's a street tree, I think we'll have to see what kind of composition of species we want in the future. So it's all dependent, you know, on where they would actually be located.
So when we were talking about the creeks, we were talking about, you know, the fish, but I think one of the things that occurs to me when I saw your list of what the urban forestry plan should address would be the consideration of wildlife corridors,
Right.
throughout the city, and that applies obviously not only to the creeks, but wildlife is also airborne, and so we need to think about the pollinator corridors, right? You probably remember learning about pollinator corridors when we did this pollinator effort, that whereas you need the smaller animals and moths and bees and whatnot need clusters, I guess, of pollinator-friendly plants every 50 feet or 100 feet or something in order to traverse the neighborhood. And urban areas can be kind of like deserts in a way if we're not mindful of providing sufficient numbers of clusters of friendly plants for them. So that kind of comes into the shrubs and more than the big trees. But we should consider all types of greenery in this plan, right? Not just the big trees, but the shrubs and the pollinator plants as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think there'll be some limits to that, but certainly habitat, is something we should consider as part of the plan, and how these, other elements of the habitat, play a role. So I think that remains to be seen, but yeah.
So when we built the Boones Ferry Bridge that no longer sinks into the marsh, that one, there was pollinator traversal routes underneath that bridge, right? The Beckman Road Bridge.
Beckman Road?
Beckman Road Bridge, yeah. Is that the only place in town where we've put explicit wildlife channels into our bridge? Or I guess we've also got the other bridge over Barber.
Yeah, and the Kinsman was certainly designed with wildlife passages, so.
Right.
Yep.
So those, I mean, can we chart wildlife corridors through the city? Is that, I mean, does it make sense?
It might be out of the scope of this project, but I think it's something that we've been working on with, there's a lot of interest in terms of like these migratory corridors, and Metro has been leading an effort in regards to that. So it's probably not going to be something very specific in this plan, but I think we should have, a reference at least to, the habitat values of trees and what does that relate to in terms of, whether the trees are being used as part of that migratory corridor or if they're specifically providing cover and food and other things, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, a question about the HOA again. I'm unclear what the relationship is between an HOA and the city in dealing with specific trees and requests for removal or replacement. Does the HOA approach the city planning department essentially as a representative of the mass of the neighborhood in place of the owners?
Sure, I can take that one. So it depends on the CCNRs, really. Certain neighborhoods do give quite a bit, including, I believe, yours, quite a bit of authority to the landscape committee over trees and landscaping. And our tree code specifically allows, in those cases where the CCNRs demonstrate authority, landscape authority of the HOA, that they have the ability to submit a plan to the city. So there's always two components. So when you're talking about a tree removal or tree management plan in terms of the ones that like would get approved through administratively or by the development review board, is there's the plan component of what you're going to do, but then there's the actual permit to take out the tree. So in those cases where an HOA may come in, they get approval for the plan component of, what trees can be taken out and what's supposed to be put in their place. But then it's up to the individual property owner to come in subsequently, typically, to get the permit to actually do the work. But it all, again, depends on whether or not that HOA has authority in the CCNRs over landscape. If it's silent to the landscaping, then it'd be up to the individual property owners. An HOA that doesn't otherwise have authority in the CCNRs over landscape could not come in and request a plan for the whole neighborhood.
So if there's a problem, the first relief would be through the HOA, unless the HOA essentially waves that off.
And it depends on neighborhoods as well, because there's certain neighborhoods, particularly in Villebois, where there's operation and maintenance plans that actually identify that the street trees are the responsibility, or even in some cases preserved oak trees and other large trees are actually the responsibility of the HOA rather than the homeowners. But typically in most of the older neighborhoods, it's going to be just, they have the authority, the city has the authority to approve a permit, but also the HOA has authority whether or not to approve any landscape changes on a property.
Incidentally, a note on the Friends of Trees page, the inclusion of a black walnut tree as one of the heritage tree species. I wonder whether that is a reference to our now extinct black walnut in.
It's a very nice stump.
Yes, it's a stump. It was a heritage tree.
It was a heritage.
It was a nearly 100-year-old. I think 85, we counted 85 rings.
Very nice tree.
Yeah, it was a wonderful tree.
I don't know, I have sort of, you know, dead and dying trees perform a really important role too, especially when you look at habitat, so, yeah.
And in our own yard, we lost a birch tree to that dread beetle.
Oh, yeah.
Which has killed off most of Wilsonville's birch trees, I think.
Or,
Yeah, we lost one too.
like I said, you know, this is just an initial opportunity to provide some input. You know, I'll be coming back with some more specific information, and you know, if you have any other questions going forward, you know, just let me know. And
I think that this, the Seattle publication is, or if that is a publication, the plan is very, very impressive. And I wish that Wilsonville could put out something, obviously on a smaller scale, because we could not afford anything on that scale, but something which would represent Wilsonville's urban forest. That's a concept I don't think is widely appreciated. And it would be very helpful if it were more widely appreciated. If there's some way we could get it out to the public that we have an urban forest, what an urban forest is, and to the extent that Wilsonville has one.
Yep.
I think that it would be very useful to have that, have some way to facilitate that. And a nice publication would do it.
yeah, I agree. I think it's a
Maybe we can enlist the Wilsonville spokesman to help with it.
Well, and like Zach alluded to, Let's Talk, you know, we have some outreach, you know, tools today that we didn't even have, you know, a year or 2 years ago. So we'll certainly make use of everything we can in terms of getting, you know, the public engagement.
Okay, anything else?
No.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Great. So as you know, Carrie Rappold is also here to provide information on the city's significant resource overlay zone. The reason that we put this on the agenda was over the last couple years as we've been working on different master plans as well as code updates, including the most recent ones related to the residential modernization work. We've had a lot of questions that have come up regarding natural resource protections, especially as they're related to our open space standards and what we're doing around open space in new planning areas as well as in redevelopment. And so I actually would like to propose, even though Mr. Rappold might not like this idea, to potentially defer this discussion. Obviously, this is up to the discretion of the commission, and I will defer to your decision on this. But I'm wondering if it would be better to postpone this presentation. It is an informational item just to provide information on the SROZ, but to defer this until we have more members present. Particularly, a lot of the questions the last time we had this conversation were from Commissioner Mesbah and Commissioner Heberlein. And so I have a little bit of, I question whether or not we should wait until they're present to have this informational item before the commission. But I will allow you to make that determination. And we can find a mutually beneficial meeting when they are here and when Mr. Rappold's available.
Do we have any objections or reservations to that?
I think that's a very good idea.
Let's do that.
Sorry, Carrie.
Like I said, I haven't been to the Planning Commission for quite some time, so it's time I come back, you know, again, very soon.
String out the love.
Straight, there you go. Yeah.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you.
So this complicated subject gets deferred for the time being.
Yes.
To the next opportunity. And it brings us to consideration of the City Council meeting action minutes. We have two meetings reported here, one October 7th and one 21st. I actually attended both of those work sessions. I would call attention particularly to from the October 7th work session, the discussion of the TIF zones, which has come before us in the past. That is under discussion by council now, and I think is probably headed to some revisions of the existing TIF zones. And on the 21st, I note an item of interest to us, although it's not strictly within our purview, relating to contractors' establishments, which are those eyesores that we see along Day Road and elsewhere, where contractors essentially are parking equipment or materials for future use on land that they somehow either own or have access to. Again, council is taking that up and particularly in conversation with Washington County. And I think that it is I just want to note personally from my position that this is an important issue and it does impact on our planning for that development along, particularly along Day Road. Among the possibilities that were being discussed was city annexation, which is almost a necessity in order for the city to do anything about a particular property. And without saying any more about that, it's not really within our purview, but I'm very pleased that the council is looking at it and may take steps to facilitate our planning in that area.
I was also interested to note that they're talking about the Basalt Creek Parkway extension, and I'm wondering where that's going. Are we talking now to the east of Graham's Ferry Road? To the extension that way?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Between there and Boone's Ferry.
Okay, so and
that is the area that actually, not so much Day Road. That's the area that mostly concerns me.
Is the extension?
What is it that you're referring to?
These lots, some of which are partially screened, some are not so much, which contain construction equipment, materials, and they're parked there. They're basically banked there. It's almost a kind of land banking, I think. But
on Day Road.
Okay.
Where are you talking?
So the presentation that went to City Council highlighted, I believe it was 5, it might have been 6, but I believe 5 parcels that have recently gone through the development application process with Washington County in the FD20 zoning district for contractors' establishments. 2 of them were on Clay Street, 2 were on Day Road, and one was, the most recent one is on Garden Acres Road. So
none of them are actually on the Parkway.
No, none of them are on the Parkway. So this has come up a couple times. Different issues have arisen because of the FD20 zoning and the process that those development applications go through with the county. We elevated some of the issues that are arising related to that, just in the sense that this is an area that can develop according to Washington County standards, but is area that's also slated for urban development. And we have an urban planning area agreement with the county related to the Coffee Creek and Basalt Creek planning areas. So we wanted to note the activity that's occurring in those areas and some of the issues that are arising from that. That information was brought to the council at that work session, and they discussed those issues.
What I'm concerned about is that those establishments, become constraints on planning. Squatters' rights, sort of, I see it as a problem, and they're not attractive in general. It seems to me that they would inhibit development rather than facilitate development, except by the contractors who own or are operating those sites.
There has been, one of the things that we reported is that a number of those parcels have had that activity for a long period of time, that typically a contractor's establishment is seen as a temporary use. It has not been a temporary use in some of the areas of Coffee Creek where they've been for a long time. They are land-intensive uses, don't necessarily provide a lot of tax revenue or high-value jobs of any kind, which is what we're looking for in the Basalt Creek and Coffee Creek areas. And so that's just the information that was noted to council, and then the council had a discussion about it and provided staff with direction to work with Washington County and do some further research. But those were some of the key issues that we presented.
Anyway, I'm happy to see that's being attended to.
Commissioner Springall, to address your question, Washington County staff, the project manager there attended the council meeting to present on the extension from Grahams Ferry Road to Boones Ferry Road. And essentially that there was already a preferred alignment selected for the Basalt Creek Parkway. And this is really to look at the refinement of that segment, where exactly that will go, and particularly where it crosses the, what we've referred to as the Basalt Creek Canyon, or that wetland area. And so they were looking at 3 different parcels on which that segment would align with, go through, and then connect to Green Hill. So they looked at 3 different connection points and have identified a preferred alignment for that. They also presented information on that alignment and the relationship to the Carlin School that is out there. And there is not a physical impact, but there's a visual impact that was noted by the assessment that they did. And so they are reaching out to the property owner in both cities around that historic resource to have further conversations about the Carlin School and how best to mitigate any visual impact to the school.
Okay. And is this alignment and this street extension compatible with our plan concept?
Yes, there's very minor modifications.
Right. And that's concept plan right now. We haven't got a master plan yet, do we?
We've adopted a concept plan. We've also, however, adopted the comprehensive plan amendments as well, and adopted the transportation projects into the TSP. So we've taken many of the steps that sometimes go along with master planning. Currently, there are council goals for us to look at some of the designations that were in the concept plan around high-tech and craft industrial to determine if we will use the PDI zoning or look at other potential zoning alternatives for those areas. We may also look at incentives and then make determinations around form-based code. We'll also do checks on the master plans for the rest of the infrastructure systems to see if there's any additional work that's done there. Because of the long process and the number of things we actually looked at in advance, we aren't certain that we actually need a full master planning process. It's more about looking at what components are typically in the master plan. We've already done some of them, what's left, and then tackling those items in the next couple of years.
Okay. But we'll need to kind of formally declare that we have master planned that so that properties can start annex and develop, right? At some point.
Yes. I don't know if we need to formally declare a master plan, but
I don't know how that works. I mean, unless if you get a master plan by steps and
we really just need to know how we're going to rezone and how to provide service on infrastructure. And we've already, in a lot of the master plan updates that were conducted not that long ago, we knew that Basalt Creek, even though it was still in the concept planning process, we knew that was coming in, and we had some associated targets around the potential up in that area. And so many of the pieces actually moved along at the same time as concept planning was occurring. We need to do probably some refined analysis to make sure that those numbers were correct, but many of the upgrades and the improvements that we're putting in those master plans accounted for development in Basalt Creek. So really what we need to have in place is knowing how we're going to zone the property if the property wants to come in, and then those infrastructure service provisions. But
so
a lot of that work is actually already completed.
So to circle back, if we had a master plan for Basalt Creek, then would we have more influence on Washington County's zoning in the near term for those properties in that area?
No.
Okay.
I mean, the situation that we're in now is that as long as it's zoned FD20, and as long as Washington County's development code currently allows contractors' establishments in FD20, then they will be allowed.
Okay.
And since annexation is initiated by the property owners.
Currently, yes.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Anything else?
I can report from a past council item that Commissioner Millen asked about Dial-A-Ride and about the work that SMART's been doing with the Dial-A-Ride committee. I don't know if any of you have keyed in on that at all. So there was a work session item back on September 16th related to the Dial-A-Ride program. And this was a presentation about the steering committee that was set up to guide the future of the program. And what the steering committee, which is made up of a number of stakeholders and exactly who's in it is identified on SMART's website. But the members actually went out and proactively solicited survey results from the public and got a total of 157 survey responses particularly for people that are within that group that are either care providers or would be using Dial-A-Ride services. And so so far what they've said is the survey shows a strong preference for prioritizing medical trips over other activities such as access to social services or work. Particularly, they also a lot of value for the out-of-town service, higher than in-town service, and that there was a willingness to pay for longer trips. And there was a good discussion that, they didn't want to wait more than 20 minutes, and that time would allow SMART to group trips better and have more people ride the bus together. And there's some final recommendations that SMART will be sharing with the City Council coming up. It's set at the time, the 18th. I don't know if that agenda item slipped, but that should be coming up. And there's a lot more information on SMART's website.
Thank you. I was going to ask about that and
Yep.
yeah, thank you for following up on that. And I'll go to the website and see if I have any other.
Yeah, if there's additional questions, let us know.
Thank you.
Yep.
Then our work program. I see for December, we are scheduled to look at resident.
Yeah, so.
This would be a pretty nearly final look.
So what's happened since then is there was, as you know, that project's a little technical.
Very technical, yes.
So it's been an exercise to attempt to rewrite it in common language, a lot of the recommendations, so which took longer than anticipated. And it's not, it's not pressing per se. So the recommendation would be to allow more time for that survey to circulate, especially during the holiday season, to get feedback from stakeholders and home builders and such, and then bring that back in January instead. And so next work session, we're finalizing some, next meeting, we're finalizing some items. We do still plan on having a meeting, including we will talk about the 2020 work program.
Very good.
And we'll talk about the SROZ maybe?
That's what we're hoping, is that we might have the information item on the SROZ, and then also potentially have and bring forward an item around House Bill 2001 and 2003, similar to the presentation that we had at City Council, but we're trying to iron out whether we can make that happen or not.
Good.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to see that.
So we'll have two technical discussions. Very good. Is there anything else? Anything for the good of the order? Being the case, then we are adjourned at 8:39.